Gacha, RNG, and chance. The three words people loathe to hear a video game be based around and be the main mechanic to interact with. But Gacha is an inescapable mechanic. No matter what genre of video game, there will always be some amount of Gacha. What varies is the intensity of Gacha and the RNG in each action. Killing a boss in an MMORPG rolls the dice to see what loot you will get. Shooting an enemy behind cover in XCOM gives you a percentage chance of success. A piece of gear dropping with variable substats and variable substat values rolls multiple dice at once and you need all sixes. Heck, even mining diamonds in Minecraft with fortune can be seen as Gacha and RNG. But as I said, there are intensities. The most intense level of Gacha is when it determines all your outcomes in the game. A great example of some nice RNG in theory is getting gear in World of Warcraft. A specific boss drops an item you need, so you know you need to farm that specific boss. And the RNG you are fighting is actually receiving the item. Will you or will you not get it? But once you do get it, its value is set in stone. It will have the stats you want it to and the effects you want it to. I will admit there are a few more logistical problems in World of Warcraft system, but the RNG part still stands. Genshin and Honkai are labeled as gacha games because you can spend money and roll for characters, and I will look at the rates of both games, but I want to take a look at all aspects of the game, including gathering, fighting, gearing up, substat numbers, and endgame systems, and any more that I can possibly find that have gacha and RNG in it. Genshin's up first. Let's take a look. When I say Genshin has a lot of RNG in it, I mean it. Even the monster drops are heavily RNG, and this on paper isn't a bad thing, but Genshin has gone to the extreme where some enemies still mostly drop the lowest rarity of item, even on the highest level world. So let me explain. Genshin has many enemies around the world and each one has their own respective material. Whopper flowers have their nectars, treasure hoarders have their insignias, and hilly churls have like 5 different items. Killing one enemy will most likely drop some items. I say most likely because some enemies like hilly churls have a chance to drop nothing. And depending on your world level depends on what rarity of item you are able to receive. The higher the world, the higher the chance for higher rarity. Quite a simple system on paper that sounds great, but there are 2 problems with miHoYo's execution. Problem 1 is the sheer difference in quantity and quality of items from enemy to enemy. Killing a Kairagi will most of the time give you 1 grey drop at the highest world tier, while killing a Black Serpent Knight will give you 1 green, 1 blue, and probably a purple, even though the Black Serpent Knights are the newer and less needed enemy. And while I understand that you can find almost 100 or so Kairagi around the whole map of Inazuma, having the drop rates for the enemy be so low to force the player to have to farm more and thus artificially increase playtime is really scummy. And problem 2 is certain enemies have 2 or more different droppable items. There are a few of these enemies and one of them are Hilichurls. A normal Hilichurl with a club only drops a mask, and they are also the most prevalent version of Hilichurls, so getting masks is super easy. But if you want the arrowhead item, you're going to have to specifically kill archers, which come in few numbers and have their loot pool split between the arrowhead and the masks. So you have a chance of getting one or the other or a bit of both. And it's the same for all other Hilichurls. The Samachurl's loot is split between the scrolls and the masks. The Midachurls are split between the club horn thing and the masks. This only affects new players as they don't have a reserve of items like older players. My main account has a few thousand of each, but new players need to actively farm and look for archers, Midachurls, and Samachurls to build up a reserve of these items. And this is further amplified by the fact that these variants of Hilichurls, archers, Mita, and Samachurls appear less, thus making it even more difficult and annoying. Fighting enemies contains the RNG you would expect when your game has crit rate as one of its stats. Crit rate works as a percentage. If you have 50% crit rate, you have a 50% chance to crit, and this percent is increased with artifacts and substats, which I'll get into in just a moment. Now onto where the real RNG begins, artifacts and substats. In Genshin, each character can equip up to 5 different artifacts: the flower, feather, timepiece, chalice, and helmet. Each piece has a main stat and 4 potential substats depending on rarity and level. The main stat for the flower and feather is always flat HP and flat attack, respectively, while the other 3, timepiece, chalice, and helmet, have variable main stats. To explain the severity of the RNG, we have to go to the beginning of when you start trying to actually farm artifacts. Artifact farming is done through domains. Many different domains around the world give different artifact sets, For this example, I'm going to use Kazuha, and we're farming for 4 set Viridescent Vanera, which is his best in slot. When you go to any artifact domain, you use 20 resin. Your first bit of RNG is which artifact set will you get. It is a 50-50 between 2, and in our case, we will either get Viridescent Vanera or Maiden's Beloved. Then alongside that 50-50, we are also hit with a 20% chance to get a specific artifact. This 20% becomes more of a problem the more artifacts you farm. After those 2 chances are dealt with, you now face the stat chances. If you get a flower or a feather, you know what main stat you will receive, and you're only fighting for substats. And these are all possible substats on the flower and feather. Out of all of these 9 options for both, only 4 are actually good for our Kazuha: EM, ER, crit rate, and crit damage. And one of them is a must-have, that is Elemental Mastery. So whenever you happen to get a Viridescent flower or feather, you are praying for EM at least, and the other 3 are nice bonuses. But the flower and the feather are the tip of the iceberg of the RNG. Going deeper, you have the timepiece and the helmet, and I'm leaving the chalice for last because that is even deeper. The timepiece and helmet now have variable main stats as well as substats, and this is a list of all available main stats. And as you might imagine, getting a defense main stat timepiece would ruin the artifact and make it unusable, even though the substats could be crit rate, crit damage, energy recharge, and attack percent. Getting the wrong main stat instantly makes the artifact useless, even though the substats could be perfect. And the same goes for the helmet. But like I said, the chalice is a different ball game. These are all the potential main stats and substats for chalices. Yes, you are fighting for a 1 in 11 chance to get a main stat. And the main reason that the chalice is utterly stupid levels of RNG is due to the fact that you need a specific elemental bonus. In all main DPS characters' cases, if you do not have their element as the main stat, you'll be doing substantially less damage. But in our case, we are looking for Elemental Mastery for our Kazuha. So the same concept is applied. We need to win the 1 in 11 and then at the same time pray for decent substats. And then on top of all of this RNG that has to do with acquiring artifacts, you still aren't guaranteed a usable piece because you have to level it up to 20 with every 4 levels giving a boost to a random substat. Unless it has less than 4 substats, then every 4 will add 1 until you have 4. And these substat boosts are completely random. If you just so happen to go all into crit damage, well then, congratulations, you have a great artifact. But the more plausible outcome is a defense or base attack funnel, which is rather useless. I can summarize farming artifacts in a very easy line of thinking. You start off with a 50-50 to decide which set you will get, then 20% chance for which piece of the set you will get. If it's a flower or feather, your chances of getting a good one are higher, but if the artifact is one of the other 3 pieces, then you are rolling a D30 and hoping for 30. Endgame content doesn't necessarily need Gacha, and Spiral Abyss doesn't have any. But to me, the addition of some levels of RNG to the system could encourage specific builds or character choices. For example, having the enemies rotate every single Spiral Abyss would encourage using different characters instead of the current per patch rotation. And even the buff cards that you choose per chamber, if they were actually RNG based and you could keep resetting to get better and better cards, it would allow the player to do some crazy numbers and have a bit of extra fun with their choices. Now onto the final bit of Gacha. The Gacha system. I have explained this in a previous video, but I'll refresh your memories. Rolling for characters and weapons is RNG. You put 1 roll in and you have a chance to get something. To guarantee yourself the featured 5-star in Genshin, you have to roll a total of 180 times. 90 rolls being the guaranteed pity. The first 90 will give you a 5-star, and this 5-star is a 50-50 between the featured and all other base game 5-stars in the game. If you lose this 50-50, then the very next 5-star will be guaranteed the featured character, and 1 4-star is guaranteed every 10 pulls. The 4-stars also follow the same guaranteed concept as 5-stars. If you pull a non-featured 4-star, the next one will be guaranteed 1 of the 3 featured 4-stars. Taking a look at the percentages though, you have a 0.6% chance to get a 5-star and a 5.1% chance to get a 4-star off of their respective guaranteed pity. As for the weapon banner, it works slightly differently. Unlike the character banner where if you lose once, the second time is a guaranteed win, the weapon banner has 1 extra step. The weapon banner gives a guaranteed 5-star every 80 rolls instead of 90, and it will take you a total of 240 rolls to guarantee your weapon of choice using the epitomized path system. The epitomized path system allows for you to pick one of the featured 5-star weapons and pull it guaranteed on your third 5-star if you didn't pull it in the first 2 5-stars. The first time you get a 5-star from the weapon banner, it has a chance to be either of the 2 featured weapons or any other base 5-star in the game. If this first 5-star isn't either of the featured, then the next 5-star is guaranteed to be one of the 2 featured weapons. If you don't get the weapon you chose for the epitomized path as your second 5-star, then you will now have 2 fate points, and then the next 5-star will be your chosen weapon. And that is why the weapon banner takes 240 to guarantee your chosen weapon, while the character banner takes 180. The easiest solution for this problem, and that is what this is, the weapon banner is definitely a problem. The solution is to split the 2 weapons into 2 different weapon banners. Have one weapon be the featured of one banner and the other be the featured of another banner. So the pity and percentages can be the same as the character banner, thus not introducing this terrible epitomized path system and general confusion to new players. And that really is all the RNG involved with Genshin Impact. And you may have noticed a large percentage of the game has some sort of chance or dice roll involved, from gathering materials to getting better gear and obviously rolling for characters. And while I have no problem with chance being in the game, when it is in every single aspect of the game, it gets extremely demoralizing to do any aspect of the game. But before we jump to conclusions and write down our answers, we need to look at the other contestant, Honkai Impact. I want to preface this with I may get some things wrong about Honkai and miss certain things because I'm not a veteran in the game, and I'm just basing a lot of the stuff on what I have researched or experienced. With that in mind, let's proceed. In relation to the same categories, Honkai doesn't have RNG when gathering materials, at least not for the most part. Expeditions is where you will gather most of your level up materials for both your characters, weapons, and stigmatas, and when completing these per difficulty, you will get a set amount of the resources. But delving into the character fragment expedition will bring in RNG. When either completing one of these stages or setting to auto-complete over a few hours, you will have a chance for a few different resources, and these resources include character fragments, which is the main reason for the RNG. And the same can be said about the open world tasks. You can only do 15 of these a week, split over a few days, and when you select which tasks you want to do, it is up to RNG as to what resource or character fragment and how many character fragments you will get as an option. I should also mention this method of farming fragments is only available to specific Valkyries. You can farm the generic Valkyries in the kind of early game days from the expeditions, and all SP Valks can be farmed from the open world tasks. Even the Universal Mirage, which is a game mode that lets you farm for free to play stigmata, has no RNG involved. When you select a level, you can see that if you just go in and finish the run, you can claim one of 2 different amounts of rewards. The first is a lower amount and you can do this for free, while the second amount is roughly 3 times more the reward at the expense of a varying amount of time swap passes, which can be gotten through various areas of the game, including weekly shops and events. I see no fundamental problem with this level of RNG due to the actual resources and specific number of them being guaranteed. The only aspect being gacha is the Valkyrie fragments, and that's because you're meant to get them from the supply system, which is fair enough. Quickly mentioning fighting, Honkai has the same crit rate and damage system, but this only applies to physical type characters. Other than that, the fighting in combat is ominously absent of any amount of chance. Increasing your Valkyrie's power is mostly static. There is a peak power that you can achieve per Valkyrie for the most part. Equip a Valkyrie with her strongest weapon and stigmatas. In this example, I'll use Aponia. Equipping her with her weapon Lost Conviction and stigmata Xeno top, middle, and bottom, and leveling everything to max will give you 99% of Aponia's max potential power. This is not the case for all Valkyries, but for most of them this concept applies. The last 1% is achievable through RNG and gacha method called refining substats on stigmatas. The weapon's power stays static at level 65 after pre-arming, which is unlocked after captain level 81. But stigmatas, even after reaching a max level of 50, can be further increased by refining the 2 substats per stigmata to boost various different areas. From this refining, there are a lot of different substats that you can boost, so bear with me here. You can get max HP, max SP increase, defense increase, added fire, lightning, or ice damage per hit, or the same elements and resistances, a base attack increase, attack for specific characters or type characters, crit increase, crit damage increase, extra damage against shields, regen to HP and SP when close to enemies, and lower SP cost in general. Now that is a lot of different stat boosts you can get when you only have 2 slots available to you. So your chances of getting what you want are definitely not in your favor, but the one upside of this is that the reroll material, normal crystal cores, are rather easy to obtain. There is a method of locking one stat so it doesn't change per roll, and this requires normal crystal cores and wafer stabilizers, but this isn't something you'll be getting until level 81. There is a second upside to this refining system, and it's that it's not super important. This will not make or break your character, as I myself have been able to now complete a pretty easy ER finality, not having glanced at the refinement system at all. Refinement was designed for the 0.1% of players who want to take their scores and percentages to the next level and ascend to a higher plane of gameplay, but for the average player, this has little to no impact. Shockingly enough, that is all the RNG that goes into min-maxing your characters. But before we look at the acquisition of said weapons and stigmata through Gacha, let's quickly skim through the endgame. The three endgame areas are Abyss, Memorial Arena, and Elysian Realm, and there is very little RNG here. Abyss per reset has a random weather effect which boosts specific elemental damage, pushing for certain characters to be used. The weather effects may have a pattern or a rotation to them, but I couldn't find anything about it. Memorial Arena has a weekly rotation of bosses to determine which characters you have to use to defeat them and get a better time. This also may or may not have a pattern or rotation, but I couldn't find anything about it either. And lastly, Elysian Realm does have slightly more RNG. The pre-phase of Elysian Realm and determining which character you want to use can be slightly influenced by the currently boosted signets or the affixes attached to the current Elysian Realm, but this for the most part doesn't change or hinder your run. The bulk of the RNG comes from picking your cards and which door appears per floor. Per floor, you get the choice of 3 doors. Each door has a chance to be one of 13 flame chasers. Then when entering your door of choice and completing the floor, you are given a choice of 3 different buff cards to boost your damage. Gauging what the actual percent chance of getting what you want is slightly difficult, as a specific door's appearance chance can be decreased or increased due to equipable items. This is the extent of the endgame's RNG, but the actual gacha system has slightly more. Honkai's banners or supply has a slightly simpler guaranteed system. Per featured character supply, you are given a specific amount of rolls before you are guaranteed the featured character. New S-rank Valkyries are generally around the 100 rolls for a guaranteed. These 100 rolls can be varied for different types of characters and weapons. SP characters generally take 25 to 50 rolls for the guaranteed, and weapons and stigmata follow this same amount of rolls. While there may be a guaranteed way to get the character's weapons and stigmatas, you can also get them before the guaranteed, but the percent drop chance varies from drop to drop. S-rank Valkyries generally sit around the 1.5% drop chance, SP Valkyries sit around the 8% drop chance. Weapons and stigmata are roughly the same to slightly lower than their respective Valks. When looking at Genshin and Honkai, I don't understand how Honkai has less gacha systems and also makes them a bit more balanced and fair, but that is the case, and so let's summarize it all. Genshin has copious amounts of gacha, one area being the farming of different upgrade materials around the world. Some enemies having drastically different drop rates of higher materials even on the highest world tier, while Honkai doesn't have gacha in the acquisition of upgrade materials, but does slightly in the acquisition of some Valkyrie fragments through these farming stages. Fighting is pretty much the same. If you have crit rate as a stat, then you will have slight RNG in the combat. This is not really a valid point, but I still wanted to mention it. The only positive for Honkai is that crit only applies to physical characters. Boosting your character power through equipment is infinitely harder in Genshin Impact, specifically when upgrading the artifact pieces. Genshin has all layers of acquiring and boosting artifacts be RNG. Not a single thing you do to an artifact has guarantee. While Honkai has equipment baseline at 99% power, and the last 1% is gained through minor RNG. Genshin's Spiral Abyss doesn't have an inkling of RNG, which may sound great on paper because less RNG. But in this regard, it makes the whole system static and boring. Not being able to re-roll cards to make builds stronger makes for boring endgames, while Honkai's Abyss and Memorial Arena have RNG in areas to promote use of a variety of characters, as the weathers in Abyss can make specific Valks useless, as can the specific bosses and types in MA. And on top of this, the infinite replayability of Elysian Realm and its card RNG is great. And finally, the gacha system. Genshin has an okay system with the character banner. Getting 5-star characters is fine with the 50-50 and the guaranteed system, but where it falls is getting 4-star characters, as it is completely possible to roll 500 plus times and not get the new featured 4-star character. The weapon banner is also just not good. 2 fails to get 1 win is dumb. While Honkai has an obvious guarantee system with a chance to get before the guaranteed. The chances are generally higher, and if the character is a quote-unquote low-value character, i.e. SP characters or 4 stars in Genshin, in Honkai it is shockingly easier to get them. Genshin is infested and consumed by pure RNG in all of its gameplay. Everywhere you go, you will encounter some sort of chance, while Honkai understands when chance is necessary and when it's not. Now, to no one's surprise, this sounds like another win to Honkai Impact. Tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Do you think RNG is generally just a negative thing, or can it have some positives like removing stagnation? What are your opinions of the RNG of both games? Tell me down below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, like, subscribe, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next one.